When Arden Tate bought a rusted-out warehouse on the edge of nowhere, she thought she was just chasing a cheap storage space. What she found instead was a sealed hatch beneath the floor, a sign reading, U.S. Defense Storage Top Secret, and a staircase descending into cold, humming darkness. It wasn't just a bunker. It was a time capsule. And inside? A secret someone risked everything to bury, and now, it was hers to uncover. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if stories of hidden pasts, lost tech, and unbelievable discoveries move you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story might just go deeper than this one literally. The warehouse had been on the county ledger for years. No takers, no bids. Just an eyesore from the Cold War era leaning into rust like it had given up trying to be remembered. Arden Tate stood in front of it now, boots crunching gravel, wind tugging her jacket, staring up at the broken windows and sun-bleached siding. The real estate agent hadn't even bothered to come in person, just emailed the code to the rusted padlock and said, "If you're serious, it's yours for $9,000, no questions." Arden didn't ask any. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for quiet, for space, for something no one else wanted, something she could make hers. The inside was worse. Her boots echoed off concrete cracked from years of freeze and thaw, and the scent of old oil and rodent nests hung heavy in the air. The steel rafters above were half-eaten by corrosion. Light leaked in through holes in the roof like tired spotlights, catching dust that hadn't moved in decades. She stepped slowly, scanning the space. It was mostly empty. A few dented barrels, a broken workbench, and a toppled shelf covered in rust-flaked tools. But something felt off. She didn't know what at first. Not exactly. It was the floor. Concrete. Yes, but not uniform. As she crossed to the far side of the warehouse, her boot hit a spot that sounded hollow. She paused, stepped back, did it again. Thud, thud, then a hollow ring. She knelt, brushed away the dust. There, under years of grime and layered paint, was a faint rectangular outline. A panel, maybe 5 feet wide, maybe bigger, fused tight, with no visible latch. She ran her fingers along the edge. Steel. Reinforced. Not something you'd find in an average warehouse. She tapped it again. Definitely hollow beneath. Something was under there. Her heart picked up. She tried to remind herself this was probably just an old utility hatch or storm shelter. Nothing unusual, but her gut said otherwise. And Arden had learned the hard way to trust her gut. She spent the next hour exploring the space. In the back corner, she found a rusted breaker box, half-melted and unmarked. Wires ran from it into the wall, and then curiously downward, toward whatever was under the floor. She took out her phone, but of course, no signal. Not out here. She stepped back to the panel, knelt again, and pressed her palm against the cold steel. It was smooth, almost unnaturally so. No weld seams, no hinges. It looked old, and yet untouched. A chill rolled across her shoulders, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun leaking through the broken roof. The kind of chill you feel when you're not quite alone. She stood and looked around. The warehouse was empty, silent. But that hollow space beneath her boots whispered one thing loud and clear. She hadn't just bought a building, she'd bought a secret. It took Arden 2 full days to clear out the warehouse. Not because there was much inside, but because everything she touched seemed to crumble. Rusted steel, collapsed shelves, piles of damp, mildewed tarps that turned to sludge the second she moved them. She hauled most of it outside with a handcart, piling the mess next to the old loading dock where weeds had claimed the pavement. A colony of mice protested from under a rusted oil drum before scattering into the tall grass. The hollow spot in the floor haunted her. Every time she passed it, her eyes drifted back, her boot tapped twice, just to confirm it was still there. It always was. By the 3rd morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She brought a steel brush, an angle grinder, and a flashlight. Kneeling down, she scrubbed and scraped until her arms ached. Slowly, the grime gave way to steel. And then, it appeared. Etched along the top edge of the panel so faint it was nearly lost to time were the words, U.S. Defense Storage Top Secret. Not military surplus. Not shelter. Not sewer. Top secret. Arden sat back on her heels, staring. The words didn't make sense. This building had no record of military use. She had checked. Tax documents dated back to the 1952 privately owned, first as a textile warehouse, then a tractor parts distributor, abandoned since the early 1990s. Nothing about the Department of Defense. Nothing about a bunker. She circled the panel again, tracing every edge. No latch. No hinge. But on the far corner, hidden beneath a layer of chemical-stained dirt, was a recessed handle, the kind that needed a crowbar to lift. She ran to her truck, grabbed her gear, and returned breathless. It took all her weight and leverage, but slowly, the handle groaned upward. Something inside clanked. The panel didn't swing open. It slid. Just a few inches. Just enough to break a decades-old seal. And from beneath it, cold air rose like a breath exhaled. Not musty. Not rotten. Cold and dry. Sterile. The air of somewhere sealed tightly and deliberately, for a very long time. She shoved harder, heart hammering in her throat. The panel screeched against its tracks, then gave way, revealing stairs. Metal. Painted gray. Descending into darkness. She backed away, suddenly aware of how quiet everything had become. No birds. No wind. Just the faint hum rising up from below. So low it felt more like a vibration in her spine than a sound in her ears. Arden stood at the edge, flashlight trembling slightly in her grip. Her fingers were smudged with grease, dust streaked her jeans, and adrenaline buzzed through her arms. Whatever this place was, it had been buried for a reason. And now, it was open. She turned on the light, took one last look at the empty warehouse, and placed her foot on the first step down. The stairs groaned beneath Arden's weight, not from rust or wear, but from disuse. Each step echoed deeper than it should have, the kind of echo that didn't just bounce, it vanished, swallowed. The beam from her flashlight cut a narrow cone through the darkness, revealing corrugated steel walls descending into a long, narrow shaft. The hum grew louder the further she went. Not mechanical, exactly. More like resonance. Like the air itself was remembering something. She counted 22 steps before the staircase flattened into a short landing, and then a door. It was solid steel, coated in dull gray paint, peeling only at the edges, no knob. Just a square panel beside it, framed with worn brass, and a long dead red light above. The kind of setup that usually required a keycard or code. Arden reached out and pressed her hand flat against the panel. Nothing. She tried pushing the door. Pulling. It didn't budge. But as she leaned closer, inspecting the seams, something clicked inside the wall, then hissed. The door slid sideways into the wall with a slow, hydraulic groan. Cold air rolled out like fog. Her flashlight flickered once, then steadied. Beyond the door was a corridor, wide enough for two people to walk shoulder to shoulder. The walls were lined with conduit, the pipes and wiring tucked into neat channels, not improvised, not patched together like most bunkers she'd seen in old documentaries. This had been built with precision, intention, like someone expected it to last forever. She stepped in. Motion lights buzzed to life overhead, stuttering, on one by one, with a sterile white glow. The hum deepened. She realized now it wasn't just in the air, but in the walls, in the floor, a vibration that lived in the bones of the place. Every surface was clean. Not fresh, not new, but sealed from the passage of time. No dust, no mold, just air that felt filtered and heavy with stillness. She passed a line of sealed doors, each marked only with a stenciled number and a lock. No windows, no labels, just cold, mechanical uniformity. At the end of the corridor was a larger chamber. The door here was different, reinforced with thick metal ribs and painted black. Across it, barely visible beneath faded lettering, were the words, Echo Vault. Arden stopped. Echo Vault? She whispered the name aloud, and it sounded like it belonged to another language, another time. She felt her pulse behind her eyes, her ears. This was bigger than she expected. Not a fallout shelter, not a stash for old supplies. A vault. She reached for the handle but stopped herself. There was something sacred about the silence. Something that said, "You don't open this lightly." She stood there for a long time, staring at the sealed vault door, while the bunker breathed around her, waiting. And somehow, she felt it wasn't the only thing that had been waiting. Arden didn't sleep that night. She tried. She lay on the floor of the warehouse, wrapped in an old army surplus blanket, listening to the wind tap against the rusted siding. But her mind kept drifting downward to the door marked Echo Vault, and to the feeling that something on the other side had been listening. By morning, she had hauled in a generator, a power inverter, and a toolkit. Her flashlight batteries wouldn't last forever, and the vault door wasn't going to open on curiosity alone. She wired the generator to the sub-panel she'd discovered near the base of the corridor. After a sputter and cough, the old engine kicked to life. Lights along the hallway snapped on in. Sequence, stronger now, steadier. And when she returned to the black vault door, she heard a soft click. The locking mechanism had disengaged. She placed both hands on the steel wheel in the center of the door. It resisted at first, but slowly turned. A groan rolled through the air, deep and mechanical, as the latches within retracted. The door opened inward, heavy and deliberate, like a vault in a bank or a tomb. Inside was silence. A circular chamber greeted her, low-ceilinged and windowless. Rows of metal shelving lined the walls, filled with military crates, canisters, and reinforced boxes. Everything was labeled meticulously, like a museum or a lab. Yet many of the tags didn't make sense. Echo 1, 2 component inert. Phase modulator core fragile. Operation EV secure. No mention of standard military issue. No recognizable serials. Near the center of the room sat a reinforced table, bolted to the ground. On it, a small projector, a locked steel case, and a thin olive-green folder marked classified in bold red ink. Arden's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were half a dozen yellow documents, stapled reports with dates from the early 1980s. The language was clinical, observational, but certain phrases jumped out at her like spotlights in the dark. Phase anomaly detected in test cycle 6. Subject responsiveness indicates cognitive recognition beyond protocol. Discontinuation order denied. Project Echo Vault reclassified under Tier Black supervision. Civilian interaction strictly prohibited. Prototype sealed under DOD Directive 47H. Arden sat back on her heels, the paper fluttering in her grip. Tier Black? She'd heard of black projects, government initiatives so secret they didn't appear in budgets. But this sounded deeper. Stranger. There were no signatures, no names, only the cold authority of redacted command. She turned to the projector, brushed dust from its surface, and found a spool of film already loaded. She hesitated. There were moments when you knew you were crossing a line, when the past stopped being history and became a live wire. This felt like one of those moments. But she pressed the power switch anyway. The bulb flickered, warmed, and the reel began to spin. Whatever Echo Vault had been, she was about to see it with her own eyes. The projector sputtered, its bulb casting a shaky beam against the bunker wall. Arden adjusted the focus, the frame settling into sharpness as the reel began. There was no sound, just flickering light, and the faint whir of spinning celluloid. The footage opened with a slate. Echo Vault prototype. E1 test footage date. March 17, 1980. 3 authorization. Classified. Then the screen cut to a wide shot of a sterile room. A concrete chamber, no bigger than the one Arden stood in now. In the center stood something covered in canvas, cables snaking from its base to a panel in the wall. 3 men in military uniforms stood off to the side, clipboards in hand, faces grim. The lead officer gave a nod. A technician stepped forward and pulled the canvas away. Arden's breath caught. It looked like a person. Or something meant to resemble one. 7 feet tall. Matte black plating over a skeletal frame of articulated joints, its chest reinforced with silver alloy. No eyes, just a smooth, contoured mask where a face might be, and beneath it, a narrow slit that looked like it could speak or breathe. The prototype stood motionless, but not dead. Cables from the wall surged with power. A dim glow bloomed in the center of its chest. The figure twitched once, then again. Its head tilted slightly. Then it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it took a step forward. Arden stared, mouth dry. This wasn't just robotics, it was presence. The footage jumped a jarring splice that broke the moment. Now the prototype stood in a different chamber. A stress test, by the looks of it. Panels exploded near its feet. Debris rained from above. But the machine didn't flinch. It walked through fire, shoved aside fallen beams with inhuman strength. Its movements were fluid, almost graceful. Another cut. This time, the camera zoomed in on its chest as technicians connected a circular component. What Arden realized looked eerily similar to the device she'd found in her father's old parts box years ago. The one he never explained. The one she'd never been able to identify. She swallowed hard. Another cut. This time, it was standing still. Alone. The room was dim. A technician off-screen asked a question. "Do you understand your purpose?" And then in the clearest frame, yet the machine turned its head. It nodded. Arden leaned closer. That wasn't programming. That was comprehension. The film ended abruptly, the reel flapping against the projector until she reached over and shut it off. The darkness felt deeper now. She sat in silence. The machine's image burned into her memory. Whatever Operation Echo Vault was, it wasn't just about storing technology. It was about creating something. Something intelligent. Something strong. And based on the footage, something awake. She looked around the chamber again, pulse hammering. That prototype, wherever it was now, hadn't just been built. It had understood. And she had a sinking feeling it was still here. The crates in the vault were sealed tight industrial latches, coated locks, bolts so rusted Arden had to use an angle grinder just to split them open. She worked methodically, one at a time, gloves damp with sweat, heart pounding with every lid she pried off. Most held dense foam casings, precisely cut to fit components of strange machines. Circuit boards that didn't match any known configuration. Hydraulic actuators curved like vertebrae. Tubes of metal alloy stamped with codes she couldn't trace. Then she found the big one. It sat alone in the back corner, covered in a thick canvas tarp, the kind used to protect armored vehicles. The crate beneath was reinforced steel, twice the size of a coffin. The moment she touched it, she knew. This was no ordinary tech. She braced herself and pulled the tarp back. The figure underneath was exactly what she feared or hoped. Tall, humanoid, motionless. Its matte black plating was layered and sculpted, not like armor, but like something anatomical. The chest was recessed, as if something once belonged there, a missing heart. The arms hung heavy, each finger ending in small, articulated digits. Delicate yet strong. Its feet were planted wide, balanced, and its head tilted downward in a way that made it seem almost asleep. The moment she uncovered it fully, the temperature dropped. Not physically, psychologically. The air around her felt thick, like she'd walked into a cathedral of forgotten gods. Arden stepped closer. She didn't mean to reach for it, but her hand moved on its own, fingers brushing the smooth chest plate. A click. She froze. One of the cables connected to its back lit up dimly, just a pulse of amber light, then died. She yanked her hand away, breath catching in her throat. "Okay," she whispered, backing up. Okay. That didn't happen. Except it had. The machine didn't move again. No more lights, no motors humming to life. But she couldn't unsee it. That flicker. That twitch. It wasn't power bleeding from old circuits. It was something responding. Something still alive. She circled it slowly, examining the body for ports, switches, access panels. On the back, just beneath where a spine might have been, she found a narrow socket, circular, and oddly familiar. She pulled off her glove, dug through her backpack, and found the small metallic device she'd carried for years, the one piece of her father's she never understood. A palm-sized disc with copper veins and a single, recessed notch. She held it up to the socket. It fit, perfectly. Her fingers hovered over the slot, breath shallow. If she inserted the device, if it worked, then everything changed. Not just her understanding of what this place was, but of who her father had been, and what he'd kept hidden from her. She didn't insert it. Not yet. But she would. And as she backed away, the machine remained still, except now, its head was ever so slightly raised, just enough to suggest it was watching. The wind howled harder that night, slamming loose panels on the warehouse walls like distant gunfire. Arden barely noticed. She sat at her workbench just outside the vault entrance, staring at the power core her father had left behind. The The same one that fit the socket in the machine's back like a key in a lock. She hadn't slept. Her fingers were stained with grease. Her mind, spinning with questions. Why had her father kept this a secret? Why hide a device clearly designed for something alive? She turned the disc in her hands. It pulsed faintly now, a soft glow ebbing from the copper lines like it was charging from proximity alone. Arden didn't know what would happen if she slotted it in, but she knew what would happen if she didn't. Someone else would get to it first. Because they were coming. She saw the first one at 2:14 a.m. A black SUV parked a quarter mile from the warehouse entrance, headlights off. No county plates. No markings. She killed the generator, darkened every window, and crept to the back with her thermal scope, a salvage auction find she never thought she'd use for anything but coyotes. Through the lens. 2 men. Suits. One had a radio. The other scanned the building with binoculars. Government? Private contractors? Arden couldn't tell. But they weren't locals. No one around here wore shoes that shiny. She stayed low, heart racing, thoughts hammering in her skull. They didn't knock. Didn't call out. Just watched. And then, without a word, they left. No confrontation. No approach. Just a silent message. We know you're in there. We know what you found. We'll be back. By dawn, Arden had moved every tool, battery, and supply she had into the vault room. She bolted the hatch closed from the inside, and ran a second padlock through the old steel wheel. Her truck stayed parked out front bait. Let them think she was gone. But she wasn't leaving. Not without answers. She pulled out her father's old shop journal, a notebook she had found weeks earlier, tucked between spare parts in a dusty crate. She hadn't read it fully, but now she flipped through the pages with purpose. In between diagrams of engine mods and notes about carburetor tuning were sketches of something tall, humanoid, with annotations that read, Core sync unstable. EV1 needs memory realignment, and beneath it all, a single word, circled in red, reactivation. Her father had been involved in Echo Vault. He hadn't just stumbled onto a secret. He'd been part of it. The notebook trembled in her hands. Somewhere, deep in the warehouse above, she thought she heard something shift a footstep. A crate falling? She held her breath. Silence returned. But the message was clear. She was not alone, and whatever she did next, it had to count, because time was running out. Arden hadn't opened the locked toolbox in years. It sat buried beneath a tarp in the corner of her home garage, covered in dust and old receipts. Her father's name was etched into the lid in faded ink. J. Tate, the only thing he ever labeled like it mattered. She'd always thought it was just sentimental, filled with outdated tools too worn to use. But after the night visit and the notebook sketches, she wasn't so sure anymore. She broke the lock with a pry bar, breath caught in her chest. Inside were layers of parts, all wrapped in wax paper, neatly arranged like a shrine to a project never finished. She peeled them back, one by one coils, insulated wires, components too, advanced for anything she'd ever worked with. Not automotive. Not even aerospace. And beneath them all, a manila envelope, brittle with age. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were blueprints. Not of a car, not of a machine. Of him. Echo 1. Cross-section schematics. Component flow diagrams. Energy regulation grids. Every page was signed in the corner, J. Tate Echo Vault Lab. 3. Arden dropped into a chair, the envelope clutched in her lap. Her father had built it. Not just worked on it, designed it. The lines of the machine, the placement of the core, they weren't guesses. They were his. And then came the letter. Folded, yellowed, barely holding together. Addressed to her, in handwriting she hadn't seen since the day he died. Arden, if you're reading this, it means you found what I couldn't leave buried. I'm sorry. I didn't want this for you. Not the weight, not the risk, but I always knew you'd find it. You see things other people ignore. You fix what others abandon. That's why I built him the way I did. Echo 1 isn't a weapon. Not originally. He's memory. He's proof of what we tried to do and why they stopped us. If you activate him, be sure. There's no going back. But if you do, you won't be alone. Dad. Arden sat frozen, tears pricking her eyes. He'd never told her any of this. All those nights they worked on cars together. all those quiet silences, and yet, buried in blueprints and faded paper, he'd been building something bigger, something secret. And somehow, he trusted her to finish it. She looked down at the power core, sitting on her workbench. She thought of the machine below, waiting in the vault, of the men who'd come in the dark, of the letter, the warnings, the promise. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve and stood. If this was the path he left her, she'd walk it. Not blindly, not recklessly, but with the same fire. He had the same stubborn belief that some things were worth bringing back. She picked up the core, heavy in her hands now, like it knew what was coming. Then she turned toward the vault, toward Echo 1, toward whatever came next. The hum in the vault felt different that morning, less like background noise and more like breath, slow, deliberate, waiting. Arden descended the stairs with the power core in her hand and her father's letter folded in her back pocket. She didn't flinch at the cold anymore. The silence didn't bother her. What unnerved her now was the certainty that the moment she activated Echo 1, something would shift. In her. In the world. She knelt behind the machine's back and studied the socket. The grooves in the metal matched the ridges on the disc perfectly. This wasn't just a port. It was a keyhole, a design meant for one hand, her father's, or hers. With a deep breath, she pressed the core into the slot. There was resistance at first, like the machine was testing her intention. Then it clicked into place. A soft chime, almost musical, echoed through the chamber. Then silence. Arden held her breath. The core pulsed once. Amber light bled through the seams in Echo 1's chest. Then a second pulse. Brighter. A slow vibration spread across the vault floor, rattling nearby crates. She stepped back, eyes locked on the machine's chest. Then it exhaled. A sudden vent of warm air from its back. Tubes hissed. Motors engaged with a mechanical whine. Echo 1's fingers curled inward, then flexed. The head rose, one joint at a time, until it faced her fully. Two vertical slits blinked open on the mask, not eyes, but sensors, glowing faint blue. Then it spoke. Not loudly, not robotic. Just one word, spoken in a low, steady tone. Arden. She staggered back. No. No way. The voice wasn't artificial. It wasn't text-to-speech. It was familiar. It was filtered, metallic, but underneath the distortion, it was unmistakably her father's. System wake sequence complete. It continued. Designated handler confirmed. Arden Tate. Arden swallowed hard. How do you know my name? Echo 1 tilted its head. Core imprint matches voice memory. You are the continuation of Project Shepherd. She blinked. Shepherd? Another pause. Initiative to store human memory as operational protocol. Secondary objective. Protect vault intelligence. Final protocol. Relay suppressed data to authorized successor. She couldn't believe it. Echo 1 wasn't just a machine. It was embedded with her father's knowledge, his speech patterns, his thoughts. He hadn't just designed it, he'd become part of it. I'm not military, she whispered. I'm just a mechanic. You are the chosen successor, Echo 1 said. And they are coming. The lights flickered. Outside the vault door, the faint sound of movement. Boots, metal, voices. She couldn't make out but growing closer. Echo 1's torso rotated, scanning the door. Engage defense sequence? Arden hesitated. This machine could protect her. It could fight. But that wasn't what her father built it for. Not yet, she said. Just follow me. Echo 1 turned toward her, sensors pulsing. Acknowledged. And then, together, they walked toward the vault door. The vault door groaned as Arden unlatched it. Echo 1 standing silently at her side like a sentinel reborn. Outside, the warehouse felt colder than before. Morning sunlight spilled through the cracked roof panels, but it did nothing to warm the tension thick in the air. They were here. 3 black SUVs parked across the gravel lot. Men in dark suits moved with the precision of people trained not to speak unless absolutely necessary. No badges. No flags. Just an air of silent authority that made her skin crawl. At the center of it all stood a man with graying hair and a slate-colored coat. His eyes scanned the building like a radar. Arden stepped forward, heart pounding. Echo 1 moved behind her. Not aggressively, just present. looming, watching. The man didn't flinch. He stepped forward calmly, pulling a small badge from his coat. Nothing flashy, just 3 letters. DPA. Defense Projects Agency. "Miss Tate," he said, voice smooth as water over glass. "We'd like to retrieve the unit. It was never meant to be activated." She crossed her arms. "It's awake now." "That was a mistake." "It knew my name," she said, louder now. "It knew my father. You want me to believe this thing is just hardware? It's him, or part of him." The man exhaled, tired. "Your father broke protocol. He embedded unauthorized neural mapping. Echo 1 was never cleared for consciousness. He left it for me." He gave her a pitying look. "That wasn't a gift. It was a burden." Behind her, Echo 1 took a step forward. The agents flinched, hands brushing holsters. Arden raised a hand to stop them. "He said it wasn't a weapon," she said. "That it was memory. Proof. You want to bury it again." "Why?" The man didn't answer. He didn't have to. Echo 1's voice broke the silence. "This unit contains classified operational data from Operation Echo Vault, evidence of autonomous learning, memory preservation, and civilian cognitive mapping. Erasure would constitute irreversible loss of intergenerational intelligence." The man's jaw clenched. "It was an experiment, one we chose to end." Arden shook her head. "You didn't end it. You hid it. And he knew I'd finish what he started." The standoff held for a long moment. Wind rustled the weeds around the warehouse. One of the agents adjusted his earpiece, but the man in the slate coat said nothing else. He just nodded, turned, and walked away. The black SUVs pulled out slowly, gravel crunching beneath their tires until the lot was empty again. Arden stood still. Not victorious, not safe, but resolute. Echo 1 turned to her. "Instructions?" She looked at the machine. This impossible hybrid of steel, memory, and her father's quiet brilliance, and smiled. "We rebuild." Later that week, she moved the operation underground. The vault became her workshop. The machine, her partner. Together they restored what others tried to forget. She wasn't just fixing something broken. She was preserving a truth meant to outlive them all. Because some legacies weren't written in books. They were built in steel and buried deep, waiting for the right hands to bring them back.